Hello, my name is Fred Rosenfeld. I'm the president of a company called AMCEST, and we're here today about the City of Linden's Linden Emergency Response Systems. We call it LERS. My company started in 1976 over Cumberland Farms, right on St. George Avenue here in Linden. And we would not have moved except that we needed a building that was UL listed for what we do. So we're now across the road in Roselle. It's interesting because we saw a need for emergency response systems, otherwise known as medical alerts, very early on. I've been with the company for 44 years. The company's existed for 48. My dad started the company in 1976, if the math is right. And my grandmother fell and needed help, and we were going to put an alarm system into her home with a button, and then we realized that didn't really cut it. So my dad, a design engineer who worked for NASA, designed one of the first medical alert systems. It always consists of a transmitter, a radio frequency transmitter that, when you press the button, will activate a home console. The home console gets traditionally attached to the telephone, and it sends an encoded message over a toll-free phone number to an emergency monitoring station, where that UL listed, meaning regulated, emergency monitoring station. So seeing the need for a system where we could talk back to my grandmother when she pressed the button before having to call the ambulance or a neighbor or a friend, that's our claim to fame. Us and one other company started this industry in 1976. By 1982, 81, we were talking to the good people in our town, the City of Linden, the mayor, the councilman, and discussing the possibility of offering this as a service from the City of Linden. And sure enough, with a lot of tireless efforts from some very, very dedicated politicians in Linden who saw the need to give emergency help when needed to people who are predominantly home alone, even a portion of the time a day. And I actually have some pictures. This came from the Linden Leader on December 15, 1983, talking about the emergency program so that people who were home alone could signal for help in the event of any emergency. That became a reality. I'd love to show you this picture. Here, it's of my father, the founder of AMCEST. And let me make sure I get the names right. It is Jane Regan, who was instrumental in pushing the program. At the time, it was Councilman Ted Kodracki. And at the time, it was Mayor George Hudak. Why is the City of Linden's program terribly unique? Well, it's from that founding of the program that the uniquity is there. Because the City of Linden applied for matching grants from Union County, and I believe there was maybe even some funds available through the state. And the program was designed to be self-perpetuating, meaning once the seed or grant money was established for the program, after, of course, the city and the county and the state made sure that our credentials, our abilities were in order. Once that was established and the seed money or grant money was given, both from the city, the county, and the state, the program was designed so that it would run itself and that the organizations did not have to come back to the grant sources over and over again in order to keep the program going. So the initial monies raised by the city and from the city to pay for a certain amount of systems, I think the first batch of systems were 100 of these machines, and it paid for the first year's monitoring, and it paid for the cost of installation and any repair or service work that was needed. It was a self-contained program. The city charged on a sliding scale a fraction of what my clients in the private sector would pay. They did it on a sliding scale so that people could feel that if they didn't have the wherewithal, that they were treated well, but everybody felt like they did pay something. And the monies collected from the monitoring service on an ongoing basis has basically sustained the program for 83, 93, 03, 13, 23. It's going on 40 years. Of course, a lot's happened since that initial program got started. I did want to limit how much I talk about my company, because I'm proud of it as a family-run and operated business. But I want you to understand what the components of what any medical alert or personal emergency response system is. As I said, it always starts out with a transmitter. The key here is that the transmitter is waterproof. So many of us, when an emergency happens, it happens in the bathroom and often in the shower. So you really don't want a system that isn't waterproof, that you could wear in the shower, where you're most vulnerable to take a pratfall and a slip. The other thing is the range. You want a system that, if it's within your home, and we'll talk about home and away systems in a minute, that if you press the button in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the basement, in the attic, anywhere in your home, it's going to work properly. And that's why one of the components of the program is that somebody who's professionally trained comes to your home or your apartment or condos, your unit, and actually tests it, fully tests it, goes to the other side of the house, says to you, where do you spend most of your time? I spend most of my time in the den downstairs. Okay, let's test it from the den. So it starts with a waterproof, long-range transmitter with a long-life battery. Typically, these batteries last 3 to 5 years, but they're designed that they test with the home base so that if the battery runs low, that gets communicated to the monitoring station so that we could be proactive to needing to change the battery or change the pendant. By the way, these pendants can also be worn around the wrist like a watch. So those of us who want to look like Dick Tracy, we can do so. The other component of the system is, in fact, the home console. If this is a transmitter, then that's a receiver. The receiver accepts this radio frequency signal, and it's a communicator. What does that mean? It means either it's attached to its own little cellular module, or it's attached to the telephone using a phone cord, where both the phone and your home phone can be in the same outlet, just like an answering machine. It's got its own backup battery, which was designed by the UL specification for these types of devices. There is a UL, meaning Underwriter Laboratories Understanding Minimum Standards, which includes 24-hour standby when the battery is charged. So even in the event of a blackout or a brownout, you have 24 hours of coverage in its charged state. And you have a two-way speaker and microphone. So the communicator dials up and gets priority on your phone and sends the encoded message, a series of dots and dashes that the computer at the monitoring station interprets. And it sends it twice. This way, any noise on the line is not going to cause a problem. The monitoring center computer sends a tone back, and this is all done on a toll-free number, and says, I hear you and I know who you are. At which point, there is a microphone and a speaker built right into the console. And so the emergency dispatcher at the AMSES monitoring station can open up the microphone, and the person who pressed the button doesn't have to get to the telephone in order to speak with the dispatcher. They say the same thing every time. This is the Linden Personal Emergency Response Center. We just received your emergency call signal. Are you okay? If the person says, I'm okay, I accidentally brushed up against it, my grandchild thought it was fun and hit the button, well, no harm, no foul. We go no further. If, on the other hand, there is no answer, maybe because the person just simply, God forbid, is incapacitated, or when we speak to the individual, they say, I need help, or maybe they say, I don't need the ambulance, but I need help getting up out of a chair. It happens. Based upon our knowing more about the nature of the emergency, we can then go into action. The city of Linden is rather unique in another very, very nice way. Because when we call the local EMS and give them all the information that's important, the city of Linden sends the police department as well. And the city of Linden, unless the policy has changed, uniquely is willing to hold keys for the people on the program, so that the police department might meet the EMS with a key and not have to force a door open. Barring the keys like that, there's something called a lockbox. And as I'm credited as a 911 instructor, so I can tell you from both sides of the aisle that you don't want a delay in an ambulance calling back to headquarters to ask if they have permission to force a door open in the event of an emergency. Of course, a life is more important than a door. But you don't want that delay, because time is of the essence when a real emergency strikes. On the other hand, you prefer not to have a door pushed open in order to get help. So whether it's the City of Linden Police Department having keys, or whether you just go out and buy a little lockbox, you know, they're the ones that you often see at real estate agents where you press a series of buttons, it opens up, it's padlocked to a front door or a railing, and then when you use the code, it opens up, and there's a spare set of keys. Well, if you have a lockbox, or you get one through us, then we put that in on the dispatch information. So what's important? What's important is that we immediately tell the EMS that somebody needs help, and what, if anything, we were able to find out when we spoke to them. We tell them if they're, of course, the address. We tell them, the EMS, if there is a lockbox so that they can, and what the code is so that they can get in the event of an emergency. And we give any really important information about the person if they choose to give us that information, the client. And that includes, you know, is there a place where one keeps all one's medication? Is there a DNR, known as a do not resuscitate? You know, do you have a living will? Is it attached to the front of the refrigerator? Are you allergic to certain medications? a general short version of medical history. All of these things that might aid the response and one day, God willing, save a life. After the call to the local authorities is made, if we have to, we then go down a list of people. These are what's called responsible parties. These are typically friends, relatives, neighbors, whom have you, where we're looking to go down that list in priority order and make positive contact with one of them. Positive contact means if we get an answering machine, we're going to go to the next on the list. So one should, if it's possible, have a few people to try to reach one of them to let those people know, those people who care, what's happening to the person who needs assistance. And by the way, medical assistance is the primary goal, but we call it personal emergency response system and not medical alert monitoring response system, because in the event of any emergency, you press the button, you're going to be talking to a trained central station operator. If you say, God forbid, there's a fire breaking out at my house or the house across the street, we're going to take action. If you tell them that there's a crazy person knocking on your door and they won't leave, you press your button. We will tell the City of Linden Police Department what's happening. After we call a series of people, everything is documented and recorded and accountable. The dispatchers know they're being recorded, tell the people that they're talking to that they're being recorded, and so there's a strict sense of accountability. You know, I told you that the monitoring station for the City of Linden Emergency Response Program is UL listed. They list the facility based upon the facility itself. Do we have a backup generator? Do we have 2 backup generators? Is the building protected? Does it have sprinklers? That's the facility side, but it's also the procedure side. How many people have manned the central? What kind of training have they had? It's great to have a backup generator so that the monitoring station remains up and running. But do you test that generator every week so that when you need it, the backup power is there? There's also UL listing for the product, the home product. So it's those minimum standards like a minimum 24-hour backup power. The fact that setting one button off won't set off the whole neighborhood. These are called multi-coding. There's a series of things that Underwriter Laboratories does to make the consumer feel that the monitoring company and the product meet reasonable minimal standards. The technology that has changed over these many years is tremendous. When my dad designed one of the first medical alert, it was a wood grain box. It looked like a mini little speaker. And it had like a traditional grill. Today, you have a modern system. It can have a cellular module for people who don't have home phones. It can report low battery. It can report when you lose electricity. It can report when those things come back. But the real innovation, and one that the City of Linden adapted early on, is something we call Home and Away. This is a system. It looks like a pendant, right? But this is a self-contained cellular transmitter. Press the button on the SOS, and it does the same thing whether you're home or you're shopping on Wood Avenue. Press the button, it activates, and it calls out over the cellular network, and the dispatchers know who you are, because it has an account number, They know what help you need because all the medical records, as if the home unit is there. But now it knows where you are because it's cellular and it's got GPS. To within, I believe it's 50 feet, we can see where you are when you press the button. And you can talk right through the button with a home and away unit. There's tremendous technology. So because it knows where you are, if you give somebody permission, there's a website. They can look and see where you are. So if you have a loved one that's worried, and they don't have to keep calling you over and over, if you give them permission, which is HIPAA, they can look and see where you are and feel more comfortable that the reason why you didn't answer your home phone is that you went out shopping. You can take this with you practically anywhere in the United States when you're on vacation or you're going to Florida for the winter, whatever the case may be, because it uses the AT&T cellular network. And the GPS works anywhere there's appropriate cellular coverage. This also has an important feature because the need for a medical alert is often because of a fall, whether it's on the street, whether it's in your home. This has fall detection. The technology is difficult to describe, but if you fall at a certain rate, in other words, not just slide to the ground, and if you're wearing it up high enough, which is why these are only available as pendants and not as wrist worn, that motion falling down will set this off automatically. It's called fall detection. And if you just plop down on your seat too quickly, the dispatcher talks right through this button. And you say, no, I just plopped down on my chair, everything is fine. No harm, no foul. So this is a home and away system, and it's available through the Linden Emergency Response. And Linden was one of the early organizations that I work with to adapt fall detection. This is what we call the blue button. And by next year, it'll be replaced by something called a LERS. This is a 3G system. You know, the cellular networks operate on generations of cellular service. Well, this is a 3G. By this time next year, there'll be 4G, and we're already starting to deploy 4G devices with even more enhanced fall detection that will not only tell us if somebody fell, but it'll tell us, are they laying on the button? Is the face forward? Where was the orientation of the button before they pressed it? There's a lot of new innovative technology. And both the Linden program and my company are staying ahead of that technology curve. The one thing I did want to tell you that is really, really nice about the city of Linden is, again, the city of Linden has made it affordable for nearly anybody to do something about their own safety or the safety of their loved ones here in Linden. If you or somebody has a need outside the city of Linden, I invite you to contact my organization directly, have it referred to you through the Linden program, and we will provide deep discounts because of the Linden connection. But what I wanted to tell you is I used to give a seminar called Buyer Beware to senior groups because there was an awful lot, and there may still be an awful lot of telemarketers in this arena, in this marketplace. They call up, they won't get off the phone, they don't give you a straight answer, and it's really troublesome. Try to avoid those folks like the plague. But the one thing that typically happens when you speak to a telemarketer in the medical alert or personal alert fear is somehow or other you look down and you've just signed something for $50, $60, $70 a month, upfront charges for the equipment, rental fees that add up to thousands of dollars. The city of Linden makes this affordable for nearly anybody to have the peace of mind that help is just a touch away, whether it's in your home or when you're out on the street. I invite you to take advantage of this very long-standing, very proactive, and very, very modernized program. I thank you for your time.